Check 1, 2.
Go! Curious about real estate? Yes! Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need. Get over the fear and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
Hello, everybody. Michael Quarles with podcast number 167. Hopefully, everybody had a great weekend, shopped for Christmas, and those of you that are listening to this in the future, it is Christmas season for podcast number 167. I really like Christmas. A couple years ago, I naturally, as a child, I've always liked Christmas, and as an older child, an adult child, and even an older adult child, I still like it. But a couple years ago, I started doing the 12 days before Christmas shopping, and I get a kick out of it. So each day, 12 days before Christmas, I go out to buy my wife a gift that she suggested me buy her, unknowingly so, during the year and our conversations that we've had during the previous year. And it is easy and it is difficult. It's easy to buy the first half a dozen. It's very difficult to buy the second half dozen because you're racking your brain on what your wife asked for. And of course, you can't ask her what she wanted because then it wouldn't be a surprise. And it would lose the whole entire meaning of the concept. So hopefully everybody had some good shopping over the weekend and enjoyed the football games and all that kind of good stuff. My Denver Broncos apparently can't figure out how to beat the Oakland Raiders, but that's okay. Here we go. Question number one. And remember, if you have a question, send it to support@bsffacademy.com. One more time, support@bsffacademy.com. Question number one. And I think it's a repeat question, or it's a similar question to before. I interviewed an escrow agent, and she described a subject to purchase as an all-inclusive trust deed. What is the difference? A subject to can include an all-inclusive trust deed, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an all-inclusive trust deed. So a subject to purchase, again, is when you're buying a piece of property, subject to, meaning you're buying it understanding that there are voluntary and involuntary liens against the property. So an idea of a voluntary lien are loans, mortgages, anything that you agree to use the property as collateral for. Involuntary liens are those things that you don't agree to. So examples of those would be tax liens, child support levies or liens, anything against your person, mechanics liens, those kinds of things. Naturally, none of those would you typically agree to collateralize the property as security for those items. So an all-inclusive deed of trust, so AIDT, is when you want to sell it, but you could use it as a seller carryback instead of doing a junior financing. The seller could do a wrap because that's what an AIDT is. And I wouldn't want them to, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is if I want to get the seller out of the way. So let's assume I buy a $200,000 house for $100,000. There's a $90,000 Bank of America loan, and I want to do a seller carryback for $10,000. If things started going sideways with my seller, maybe they got jealous, they got insecure, they had seller's remorse, whatever it was about the idea that I was going to make $100,000 on the flip of their property, and they were in a wrap situation, all-inclusive deed of trust, I would have to, in order to get them out of the picture, I would have to completely pay off that $100,000 wrap, which was created using the original $90,000 Bank of America note and the $10,000 seller carryback. Sorry for the stuttering. If they're in junior position, meaning junior is behind the other notes that are already, or deeds that are already recorded against the property, and so instead of a wrap, they're just a $10,000 junior note and secured by the property. If things went sideways, all I would have to do is pay off that $10,000. There's advantages to that. The other advantage is on a wrap, you typically, especially on resale, you typically want to increase the interest rate above what you're paying to the underlying mortgage. So that $90,000 Bank of America note, say it's at 8% fixed, your wrap, you want to be at least, I want to say 1.5% higher than that 8%, so 9.5%. So on a wrap situation from a seller carryback, I'm going to be paying a 1.5% on the 90 above what the seller's paying, and 9.5% on the 10,000. Where if I just did a seller carryback junior loan, I'm only doing 9.5 on 10,000. I'm doing 8% on 90,000. So economically, it's better for me, which is why we also do it on resales if we ever do a sub 2 resale. So great question. It's a bigger answer probably than even the answer I gave you. And hopefully I didn't lose some of you guys. Sorry about that. Question number 2. In speaking with a potential escrow agent, she stated that on a concurrent transaction, they have to disclose the whole transaction to the seller, including my sales price. Should I find a different escrow agent based upon this? Negative. It is a negative, but who cares? Now, if they said I had to disclose it to the underlying lender on a short payoff or to the new lender on a buyer purchase, I would wonder about whether or not I want to have a new escrow agent. But if they're going to disclose it to the underlying seller, I don't know why they would and why they would be required to, because you have two different transactions. And you could literally do your sell at one closing company and your purchase at one closing company and your sell at another closing company, and they wouldn't be privy to the knowledge in the first place. So if that were the case, they have to look at that same instruction if they were doing a concurrent close themselves. So you can still do a concurrent with two different closing companies or escrow companies. It's easier to do it with the one, and I don't believe it's the obligation of your closing company to tell your seller what you're selling the property for on your flip. Now, if they do, who cares, right? Because it doesn't affect anything, or shouldn't, and the only person that will allow that is yourself. So, and that's why we're open and honest with the sellers. We're going to make a huge amount of money flipping your house, and if we get lucky, it's great. If we don't, man, it's not so huge. So, what you resell the property for shouldn't influence your decision or the seller's decision to sell. Once you have something under contract, you have it under contract. And I think honesty is the best, defense in any case where if you start wondering if you're doing the right thing, if you can't be honest with it, don't do it, or with the seller, don't do it. But in a case where you have a house under contract and your escrow company or your closing company tells your seller you're making $100,000, who cares? Really, at the end of the day, who cares? I mean, divulge it. Be proud of yourself.
Thanks for listening to Buy, Sell, Fix, Flip. We'll be right back. Are you running out of leads? It's time you tried Yellow Letters at yellowletters.com. Get motivated seller leads through yellow letters, postcards, zip letters, typed professional letters, greeting cards, door hangers, and business cards. Yellow Letters is a full-service marketing company created with your success in mind. Get the personal attention you need to get your direct mail campaign started, and get in touch at yellowletters.com.
And we are back in 3, 2, 1.
Question number 3. Did you mention in a podcast that you were updating and releasing your book? Yes, I did. It's 101 Ways of Marketing as a Real Estate Investor. The reason we're updating it because some of the things on the internet have changed so dramatically that over the last 7 years that it just has to be increased. Some of the stuff is normal. And as an example, we wouldn't want to do full page ads in the newspaper anymore. And there was a chapter on that. So, I mean, why have dead space? I mean, you guys don't want to read something that's useless, I hope anyway. And so, yeah, we're going to re-release it. It'll come out. And I guess we'll put it on Amazon where everybody else puts their books. A little plug for Amazon. So hopefully it'll be a good read. There's actually 102 methods instead of 101, but it's called 101. Just round numbers, I guess. Question number 4. How does gap funding work, and where can I find this for some of my projects? I have no clue what gap funding is. I've never heard the term. Probably because I'm going to assume they're talking about funding that will allow you to buy the property while you're flipping the property on instead of doing a concurrent recording. So if you're going to do a delayed resale of just a few days, then you have that interim financing that you're going to have to obtain. And there's plenty of people out there that do that. Keep in mind that when they start charging you points for interim financing, that really pushes the interest rate, although points aren't interest. It pushes the interest rate or the cost of that money through the roof. Because if you're paying let's assume for a second you're paying 2 points for a 7-day right to use money from someone, but you're paying 10%. On the a lot of people would say, yeah, that's a great thing. Well, you're really paying 114% interest, aren't you? Because if you have 2 points for, a week times how many weeks in a year, that's your point basis. So that's 104 points. And then you have 10%. So that's if you add points, because points are interest from a calculations perspective, it gets really expensive. Now, in some cases, that's what you have to do. That's just what you have to do. And, it's not as expensive as not doing the deal. That's why when you look at some joint venture stuff with other investors, that's, it's reasonable, because something is better than nothing as long as what you're going to earn can be justified with, and your time can be justified based upon what you're going to earn. So if that makes any sense, sorry, I said that backwards. But I assume that's what they mean by gap funding. I've never heard of it referred to as gap funding, but it makes sense, I guess. Question number 5. I have a tenant whose lease is not up until March of next year. She called me hysterical. I've had those too. Saying that she's in danger and that cannot return to the house and needs out of her lease. What should I do in this situation? 2 things, I think. Tell her thank you for calling, and only call you when something about the property, when she has a concern regarding the property, not something in her personal life, because we don't want to get personally attached to these these tenants, or sellers for that matter. I would probably at that point refer it to my property manager or my attorney that handles that kind of stuff for me. That's why we have them on retainer. You have to ask yourself, do you want to let her out of the lease? Are you in a better position to let her out of her lease? Is she saying, I can't pay the lease payment and I'm going to be forfeiting it anyway? And if that's what she's saying, well, then, make sure that she understands, or they understand, the deposit's being forfeited as well, and what have you. But I would want to make sure that I did everything I needed to do legally, and find out what your local rules are for people that say they've abandoned property, and what your time periods are, so that you don't enter the property and take possession of the property, even though she indicated to you that she wanted you to take possession and she can't go back. People who are hysterical have a tendency of changing their mind abruptly. And, her issue may have been solved. You've moved her out. In my area, we have to store anything that we believe is a value of $600 or greater for 30 days. Of course, we can charge them a storage fee, but we legally have to do that. Do we want to go through that hassle? I would talk to your legal rep on that and find out what your requirements are. If you have a strong deposit and a cosigner, which you may have in a case like this, I would look to those people to continue to pay them the lease. If you were in fact going to do something else with the property anyway in March, and now we're in December, so what are we looking at, 4 months anyway? You may decide, well, as long as you can legally confirm that she's vacated the property and whatever documents you need her to sign for you, so you have that legal possession of the property, maybe you want to do something like that. I think what you don't want to do is become emotionally involved. Do not try to help her out. People fall where they fall on their own in these kinds of situations. Unless she's a relative, unless she's a very good friend of yours, unless you've had past experiences with her where she's looked to you for some of those emotional guiding things, I would kick it, and I would just send it off to my attorney and have him charge me, $4.25 an hour, and take care of whatever I need to take care of. In the big picture of a lot of this stuff, although an attorney at $4.25 an hour seems expensive, sometimes it's very inexpensive in comparison to what you could do to yourself by not doing things correctly. So as in a case, and as a great point, I have a friend of mine who is a passive income person. He's a school teacher, so for him it works great. He has 2.5 months during the summer off and all the major holidays off, and he just likes apartments kind of thing. And there's a guideline on how many days that we can return a deposit to somebody at the moment that they've given us their 30-day notice, or the date that the lease is up and they haven't extended. That if someone gives us a 30-day notice, then at the end of that 30 days, when they have vacated, we have so many days to get them back their deposit, or at least notice them that we have deducted X dollars from their deposit for those X things, and give them the balance. If we don't, then they can take us to court for trouble damages, which is 3 times the deposit amount. Well, he had a tenant who gave him a 30-day notice. He manages his own property because he's Mr. I know everything about real estate. And No one knows everything about real estate, by the way, guys. I didn't even know what gap funding meant, so what the heck. So they took him to court. He didn't, because he didn't give them back their deposit in a timely manner. He and I debated whether or not he should, and I kept reciting the ordinance for California that required him to give them back their deposit or notice them about their deposit. So anyway, they took him to court. They won, pissed him off. So he took him to small claims court. They won, trouble damages. So now the $900 deposit was $2,700. He had 30 days to pay the $2,700 or be summoned back to court to show his ability to pay that or not pay that. So he didn't pay because he was all frustrated. So 30 days go by. They take him back to court. He doesn't show up for his court date. Well, that was kind of silly because then the judge just gets involved. So they took it as far as attaching his bank account. And now, of course, this is a guy who had that money in his bank account. Most of his properties were free and clear. This was just a principal issue for him. Stupid what it was. They took him to court. They attached his bank account. They did one thing. Well, they took it one step further. They sent in the judgment to the credit bureaus, and now his really pristine credit report had a judgment against it. So you got to make sure that we do things the right way, guys and gals. And sometimes that $425 is well worth the $425. And because, we get emotionally involved. And if you have a tenant that's already emotional and hysterical, what are you going to do with that? So that's what I do. Keep in mind, guys, hey, don't stop your marketing. I know Christmas is close, but continue. Get ready for January. If you want to get in the coaching program, fall forward, holler at me, kindly anyway, and we'll discuss it and get you in the program. Anything else I can do for you, let me know. Keep sending in the questions to support@bsffacademy.com, and we'll continue to answer them. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.